not every law student comes out making six figures, right?
Yep.
I mean, they don't. Is that true? They're
Yeah.
somewhere in that 50 to 80,000 range. I don't know, but I think people have like seven figures in their mind. I'm going to be making $1 million a year.
Yeah.
I think that's expectations, right?
Yeah, and that's at the large firms. At the large firms, you can make that as a first-year associate. You can make some. I mean, maybe not seven figures, but low, mid, sixes, or So yeah, you can. But that's. Large firms are working 80, 90 hours a week.
They own you.
Yeah, yeah. So
you're there. You are theirs.
Yeah, and it's brutal. And I did that for a couple of years, and it's brutal. And I knew I didn't want to be there forever. I wanted to work, move to a smaller firm, and then eventually on my own.
Welcome back to another episode of Kingdom Heirs, where faith meets business, inspiring the kingdom-minded entrepreneur. Today, I've got the great privilege of having with me Brian Maul, who happens to be my brother-in-law, who is an attorney for the past 24 years practicing law in the state of Maryland, and 11 years ago went on his own to start his own private practice handling civil litigation. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, James.
I'm happy you're here, dude. I'm very happy you're here.
Me too.
I've been going up to Maryland for the past 13 years, maybe 14, 15 years. And I see Brian usually over the holidays. And I always say, Brian, when are you coming to Texas? And I finally got him and his wife, Sheila, down to visit me.
You did. Success.
I really leaned in heavily into, I'm just not going to come back and visit you anymore until you
Yep.
come down and visit me.
Yep.
And it worked.
You did. Yep.
So
hardball. So you got to play hardball.
You got to play hardball. So I'm glad you're here, Brian. Law practice. You've been an attorney for 24 years, 25 years.
Yep.
You're getting old.
I know. Tell me
And
about
I guess
it.
I'm getting old too.
Yep. We all are.
We just keep getting older. And so Brian is someone that I call, though we live in different states and laws are different, Brian is someone that I call whenever I have a legal question pop up. And over the years, I've had several legal questions. And Brian, you focused on what type of practice? Like, what's your primary focuses?
Yeah. So it's all on the civil side. So I usually tell people what I don't do. I don't do criminal law. I don't do family law. So it's all sort of civil disputes, people fighting over money. It could be business partners, construction law, real estate law. Also do some landlord-tenant. But a lot of business disputes, business contract, business partnership, both transactional work and then also litigation in court.
Sounds fun.
Yeah.
Sounds fun. Sounds fun. I am certain that many people who are listening today have experienced at some point in their life a dispute with another person, especially if you're an entrepreneur, you're a business owner, contracts, having a good contract, having a poor contract. What have you seen in your career? What's like the number one type case that people come to you with related to business?
Yep, it's probably business partners who didn't want to spend the time or money putting together sort of a solid contract on the front end because they just couldn't imagine things deteriorating. A lot of times these are friends and people they've known for a long time, and they didn't have a lawyer put together an agreement, and a lot of times it could be years and years down the road before any dispute arises. But then when it does, not having that solid contract caused them to have a lot more costs, legal costs, and a lot more risk at trial. Because for whatever reason, it could be that they just wanted to keep it sort of on a handshake basis. They thought they didn't need it, or they just didn't want to spend the $1,000 or a few hours to have a lawyer draft the document. But a lot of times, it end up costing a lot more money
down the road.
Yeah.
Why do you think most small business? So you deal primarily with small businesses, right?
I do. So I do represent individuals. I also represent small businesses of all different kinds. Like I said, I do represent contractors and subcontractors, but I also represent all different types of businesses. in the Frederick area.
Okay. And so why do you think that most people think that the handshake and the verbal conversation is their bond? Like, why do you think that people will default that way, especially the older school kind of generation? Why do you think that is? Why do you think they kind of stick to, well, I gave you my word?
Yeah, I think it's that sense of your word is your bond, and you don't need a piece of paper.
That's how my father grew up. Like, that was, I'm sure your father's the same era. Like, that was like, your word is your bond. And
yep.
But other stuff happens, right?
Yeah.
Like in that process.
Yeah, and the truth of the matter is that a lot of times both parties can be acting in good faith. I mean, if a party is acting in bad faith, then it's true a contract might not. I mean, it can still make some of a difference, but if someone's intent on breaching that contract or acting in bad faith, there's nothing you can do to stop that. And even if contract's as solid as it can be, you still might end up in court if
Right.
one of the parties, especially, is acting in bad faith. But you could have both parties that are acting in good faith, and they just each understood the deal to be something different, and not having it written down, or maybe you just even think about what issue might arise 5 years down the road, and and you just didn't even envision that issue to even reach an agreement about it, and then you have a dispute as to what you thought the agreement was, even if both sides are acting in good faith.
Yeah.
That is where like a solidly drafted contract can sort of benefit both parties, because ideally, if it's addressed in that contract, then there's nothing to fight over. Now, again, even the most detailed contract, there's always room to argue and fight over things.
Sure there is, yeah.
So it's not a guarantee, but it definitely makes a difference to help alleviate those issues.
I once heard someone say that a contract is only as good as the two people signing it.
True.
Is that it's a true statement?
Yeah, I mean,
because you need you need both side of the agreement to represent their end of the agreement, right?
It is, and I mean, there's two sides of that. Is like, yes, even the most perfectly drafted contract, if one side, especially if one side is acting in bad faith, and maybe they feel, well, we have the leverage and the money, we can breach this contract, and it still is more financially beneficial, or we can bury you in legal documents and force you to settle for something less because we have more resources than you. Yeah, even a contract that's drafted well might not save you from that situation. But again, if you have two parties who are acting in good faith, then a well-drafted contract absolutely can save you, or possibly save you from arguing over things that would already be addressed in the contract itself.
That's a good point. So when, just kind of thinking about the situations I've been through a lot, especially through contract law with as a builder, as a general contractor, have been a subcontractor at times. These contracts can get pretty thick, and it can be very intimidating. And I know a lot of smaller contractors that are maybe been in the game a long time. Maybe they're a onesie twosie. They don't want to really go through the effort of getting insured, having a good insurance policy, which I highly recommend, having a great insurance policy to protect you and what you do. But there's other contracts where a subcontractor's got to sign with a general contractor, and a general contractor's got to have to sign then with an architect. It's very intimidating. So a lot of guys won't even bother. They're like, I feel like it's just.
Yeah, and I would say, sometimes, and I think correctly, the depth or detail of the contract can relate to the size of the project. Like if you're doing a small project, $10,000, $20,000 remodeling, you don't need to have the AIA 50-page contract.
Correct.
And that at that point it becomes counterproductive a lot of times. And even I don't often recommend the IA contract because it's so dense, and if you don't dot a single I, the other party can use that against you to say basically you've waived your rights, you didn't file the contract, and it's just at that point it's becoming counterproductive. Now it's just used as like a hook to
bait somebody.
To get out of your obligations, and so I think a lot of times the scope of the project itself is often proportional to sort of the amount of detail or depth you maybe want or need in the contract itself.
It's true. I know I've started, when I started in remodeling, handyman, remodeling, to contracting, to building to, doing just kind of scaling up. We start with a basic kind of like, it really wasn't even a contract. It was like terms of the agreement. Yeah. This is what I'm going to do for you, and this is what you're going to do for me, and this is how we're going to get paid, and this is my 1-year warranty, right? Yep. And it was real simple. And as we kept going, and the dollar amount that we were bidding on kept getting higher and higher, it started getting more complicated. And it seemed like the people that we were working for that had like the more affluent and wealthy folks, were certain we are going to have a solid contract here. And it was like either written from their perspective, or I'm like, well, wait, but what about my contract, which was really just terms of an agreement. It wasn't really a contract. You know what I'm talking about? So in other words, a lot of people will start out in business with just terms of an agreement, but it's not really legally binding. It's kind of like a handshake at that point. And so I know I came to you and I said, hey, I'm having this issue with this client. And you're like, well, send me what your contract is, James. And I sent you my contract. You're like, James, this really isn't a contract. This is more like a good faith. This is what I'm going to do for you, and you're going to pay me when I finish the work. But there really wasn't like any legal law stated. There was nothing really stated. Do you remember? I'm talking several years ago. You remember that?
Yeah. And that's where the depth comes in. Some of those other, contracts, like I said, the AIA, it's, there's 5 pages dedicated just to the issue of like delay.
Yes.
Who's at fault for delay, what the remedies are, and all of that. Absolutely.
Yeah. It was helpful when after we met and we talked about it, and I was working through the situation with the client at the time, and I realized that every time I experienced something negative from a client, I added it into my contract.
Yep.
Every negative experience.
And that's how those contracts came to be, is through people in the industry having those experiences. And that's why the contracts just keep getting longer and longer.
Yes.
Because if you went back 50 years, 70 years from now, the contracts weren't as long as they are now. It is the same exact thing. The industry added, more clauses and clauses to address the exceptions to the exceptions to the exceptions as they learn from experience. And that's actually how those contracts have developed into 60-page contracts, is from the experience of going through something, and our 40-page contract didn't cover this issue, and we just went through, so now we're going to add that. Now it's 41 pages.
It gets very, but to your point, it's perspective. If you're in a $50,000 deal, $100,000 deal, 200, 300 million. We just signed a deal for just under $2 million, and it's an AIA contract, and it was like they took my terms, and they basically took my terms and said they don't apply to my AIA standard agreement with the architect managing the deal. And I'm like, are you kidding me? So my terms, you're basically telling me I need to change the way I do business. And they said, if you want to do business with us, yeah. And so it's tricky. It gets tricky. But I think the key thing is that I'm learning, and really you've helped me in this process. And that's why I appreciate you sitting here today. Is you said, no, James, you've got to protect yourself, protect the client, good faith on both sides. But, if your contract doesn't have the right verbiage in there, you really can't, you don't have a lot to stand behind when things go wrong.
Yep.
Arbitration versus mediation, right? Like.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's been interesting.
Yeah. And I would say in the construction, I would say arbitration is often a good option. It's less costly often than litigation. It's a little bit more streamlined. So especially construction cases, because so much of it is so fact intensive, much more so than even just the average case. And so taking a construction case, a large construction case dispute through litigation, I mean, you're talking, easily 6 figures in attorney's fees in a lot of those cases. And so, even just having an arbitration as an option can cut that down significantly.
And arbitration just means, so if you've got a contract right now and you don't have an arbitration clause, it'd be a good idea to add an arbitration clause, which means it's versus trial. Is that correct? You first go right to arbitration.
That is correct. Now, just like a lot of things, can be pros and cons. So one of the cons to arbitration is there's a large upfront filing fee. So it does depend upon the size of the claim, but just generally speaking, an arbitration case, depending on the size of the claim, could cost $2,000 or $3,000 just to file the case. So even if it's a smaller claim, like $50,000, there's a large upfront filing fee, and you're still going to have attorney's fees as well as the case progresses, but the discovery and litigation process is more streamlined, so it will generally be less expensive than litigation. But for a smaller case, you might just want to go into your little local district court, like for a $10,000 or $15,000 claim. It might actually be cheaper to go through court than arbitration.
Got it.
So you also that is another issue where you might, and this isn't legal advice.
Might consider.
Well, yeah,
you might consider.
It might in a lot of cases be beneficial to have arbitration in a larger case, larger claim amounts, and in smaller cases, it might not be the ideal.
Understood. Because you can you can settle it in civil court just with the local judge.
Yep, you might get a hearing or trial in 3 months, and spend same amount, like $1,000, $2,000 on a lawyer, and get a judgment quickly. So it can vary.
Yeah, I think as a lot of times when entrepreneurs start out, and you started out 11 years ago on your own, you left a good sized firm, and you started out on your own. Why did you do that? You're probably making good money at the firm.
I was, but it was that whole independence thing, I've always had an independent streak, and I just wanted to be on my own. Yeah, it wasn't about the money. I just wanted that freedom. And it really was night and day. I mean, I learned a lot from my 10 years at that firm, but just being your own boss, like it was like night and day in terms of my enjoyment of
practicing. Yeah.
Yep. And having that direct relationship with all my clients and choosing who my clients are and just everything about it.
You weren't just assigned the pain in the neck clients that the other guys didn't want to take. They're like, Brian, and you get this Joe Blow. And you're like, oh, because he's a great client. No, because he's not a great client. Right?
Yep. And sometimes you still, have that happen,
Of course.
But overall, it's just like night and day, I would say.
Any advice for someone who's at a law firm right now, doing their time, putting their time in, but it's kind of daydreaming about what it'd be like working for themselves? Any advice for what it's like to step out? Like, how long does it really take? I mean, you could step out knowing you got a big case or a big client stepping in and saying, "This is my time." Is that kind of the time to do it? Because you need to bridge that time of going a solo entrepreneur. At that point, you got to make your check.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and it is tough to say. And for me, there was just something in my gut that just said, if I don't do it now, I'm not going to ever do it. Like I think when those 10 years were up, I think I was like, if I don't make the leap now, just something in me said I'm never going to do it. And
there's a lot of people that think that way. To your point, it's like a clock.
Yeah.
The clock's ticking. This is my time now.
Yeah, and because there was no reason at that point not to. Like I, had built up enough of a nest egg to be able to make that leap. I had, over 10 years of experience, under my belt. And so, it was realized like, if I don't do it now, I don't think I'm going to make that jump. It was not easy because I didn't leave with any clients. So
yeah, right. Yeah, you didn't steal half the firm.
No,
yeah,
I did not.
You didn't take all the disgruntled employees with you?
Nope.
No, that's good.
I didn't.
They would have been disgruntled with you as well, by the way. It's just how that works.
This is true. I did not take a thing. So even though I had the experience, I was still starting from the ground up. You
had to build your book, build your business.
Yep. And
how hard was that?
It was
because you were in this huge town, huge big city, right? Or were you in a small town? What was your...
Frederick at that point had started its growth spurt, so it was a good time to be starting a firm. I would say the first 3-4 months were pretty rough because, I get one case at a time. I mean, a new case here, a little small case. And, it was sort of just build on itself. But, those first few months where, you don't have enough cases to, live on. You couldn't sustain yourself.
You're drawing from your savings. You're like, oh, this is dwindling down. Yeah.
You don't know what's going to happen. That's the biggest thing is you have no idea what's going to look a year from now or 3 years from now.
You have no idea.
Are you going to have no clients or 2 clients and have to shut it all down and find some other line of work? No idea. So that is definitely a big hurdle is that fear of is this going to succeed or not, and
And
not having any idea, not having a foundation of clients or.
And you have a faith. There's a faith valuation there too, though, right? Because you're stepping out knowing that a lot of other people do it. I could do this too. Why won't it work for? It's worked for them. Why wouldn't it work for me? But there's some people that will never take that leap.
Yeah.
Because they have that security of the paycheck.
Yeah, and it is not easy, you know. And I think, you know, in some different people with different dispositions, it could be more difficult or easier for them. Like, you know, some people have a higher risk tolerance and it's easier for them to do that. And other people have, you know, high risk, you know, tolerance and it's not easy for them to do that. I don't know. I would say I'm probably somewhere in the middle. Like, I just felt like this is something I have to do. I don't want to be working for somebody else my whole life.
Yeah.
But it wasn't easy. And those first few months were really difficult because you have just no idea what it's going to look like. Is it going to succeed? And it was only until, like, I would say month 5 or 6 that I got to the point where it was like pretty steady work. Mm-hmm. And then at that point, I was like, well, is this just going to fluke? Is this just a fluke
or not? Yeah.
And 3 months from now, it's going to be back to ground.
Well, because our minds always play. Yeah, we're like, which way could it go?
I have no idea. Like, oh, okay, I've built up a certain client base. I'm getting phone calls. But it's just like beginner's luck. And next year, it could all be gone. And I was very fortunate in that pretty much after those 6 months, and ever since then, it's just been steady, busy work, you know, since then for the past 10 plus years.
10 plus years.
Yeah.
I had said to someone recently who's starting out in a business venture, first time around. I talked to a lot of like newbies, like startups, you know, and Megan and I have done a lot of startups over the years. And I said, look, they're looking at the payments, their overhead. They're like, I said, listen, just so you know, your first year is going to be your worst year. Just so you know, your first year is going to be your worst year. And he looked at me like, I said, well, dude, you can only go up from here. I mean, your first year is not going to be great, man. Yeah. It's just not going to be great. Yep. It's because you got to get through it, you know?
And that's, there's just like Bible says, there's different times, different seasons. There's a time to plant. There's a time to harvest.
That's right. It is true.
And that's just it. You're in a planting stage, and you're not reaping the benefits of that yet. And
that's
you're just hoping that at some point
it's going to work out. It's going to work out. Well, it's true. I think some people look at lawyers, and they're like, oh, lawyers. And honestly, lawyers, doctors, and contractors all have the same rap. It might be doctors, lawyers, contractors, depending on. We're all kind of like in this like bad rap category, and it's true.
Yep.
And you've said to me, I know you've said this. You said, people may not like lawyers, but until they need one, they want to make sure they get a good one.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And so I think people look at lawyers and they say, because I've done it, I'm guilty of this, and say, oh, they're just, this, they're that. And there's just.
Well, some are, like you said, that's the thing, is there's always people like that in every profession. Yeah, some professions might even have more of those people. And the problem is, I think a large extent, a lot of times those personality traits that maybe don't make a person you want to be friends with, it serves them well in that profession. And that's it.
That's a good point.
Lawyers, litigation, it's adversarial process. Like, it doesn't reward kindness.
We're going out to win.
Yeah.
And if we got to do the kill, we're going to kill. We're going to get there. Yeah.
Yeah. And so those personality traits that you wouldn't necessarily want to be friends with somebody, it is sometimes often rewarded in the profession.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, you don't have to be like that to succeed. And
Let me ask you this: my brain, I'm ambulance chasers. My brain's just going ambulance chasers. What does Brian think about ambulance chasers? I mean, I don't know if everybody knows what that term is, but what do you think about ambulance chasers?
And my understanding of that is, lawyers that would literally follow the ambulance to the hospital so that they can sign up the patient to be their client, and so they literally
see who they could sue
to the hospital, sign them up to sue whoever hit them and put them in the ambulance.
There's a special place in the world for people like that, because it's trying to capitalize on somebody's misfortune moment, and somebody's going to pay because there's insurance for somewhere out there's insurance to pay for that, right? I mean, that mentality.
And I don't do personal injury work. I will say, I did more plaintiff's work, and now I probably do a little bit more defense work. So I'd say I probably at this point I'm like 30 or 40% plaintiff's work and probably 60 or 70% defense work. And I don't do any personal injury. But just like criminal law, like I couldn't see myself defending somebody who was, who I thought was a murderer. But at the same time, I recognize the principle that like everybody has to have the best defense possible because the state has unlimited resources to prosecute somebody.
It's so true.
And
that's a great point. Yeah. That is a great point. Somebody could be wrongly accused, which DNA tests later on, years later, right?
Absolutely.
A number of people were wrongly accused, convicted, and put away life sentences and or executed under the fact they never did it.
Yeah.
And DNA proved that. So to your point, that you really need a lawyer who's fully committed to the process, who's willing to go to bat 100% in good faith.
Yep.
Unless you know the guy's guilty because he told you he's guilty, and you're like, all right, now you told me. Like, now what am I going to do?
Yep.
I need to remove myself from.
And that is one of the few lines there are, for lawyers ethically, is you just can't knowingly put on false testimony. So you don't. If your client told you that, you couldn't put him on the stand and knowingly present false testimony. To your point about that,
it's true.
But yeah. There have been a lot of people who have been innocently convicted, and the state has unlimited resources. So in principle, I agree with it.
Yeah, you need it.
And
you
of
need
course,
to be the representation.
imagine if for some odd circumstance, you were accused of a crime you didn't commit, you would want the best lawyer that you could afford. But at the same time, I wouldn't want to be defending somebody that I thought was guilty, despite recognizing that principle.
It's true. No, and I think that's just part of it. And part of it is like, and the reason why I kind of bring that up is I think some people, maybe in the faith community and or just at the community at large, don't want to go to lawyers because they have this connotation. And so deals get done without good representation because they have a connotation of, no lawyers, But meanwhile, they're like, dude, if you just had the right lawyer who would represent you fairly, the price is the price. Like going to a doctor, the price is the price. It's like going to a contractor. Yep. The price is the price, guys. And people are just like, well, they shouldn't earn that much money. Well, then if you disagree, then just wait on the outside. When you need one, go hire the guy who's the least expensive and see what you get.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, there's this mentality, I think, that needs to be overcome. I think especially in the faith community, it's so important that our entrepreneurs that think, man, I really need to get protected. I need to make sure I'm doing things smart. In the counsel of many, there's wisdom. The counsel of many, right? And just having someone as yourself, people sit down with. I'm sure. How much advice have you given? People sit down in your office, and they want a consultation. I mean,
you mean like for
just,
free?
Just business advice. How many people come to you for business advice?
I mean, I've had hundreds of clients over the years. I mean,
and mostly is it because they're obtuse to the law process, or is it just, are they just it's just not what they focus on. Like it's not like their main thing.
Yeah, it's for me it's really varied because I have a varied practice. So I do landlord-tenant law, so I represent a lot of landlords where they're just operating their buildings, and if someone's not paying rent, they
how do you evict them? How do you get them out?
Yep. And then, like I said, I also work in the construction industry. So whether it's I'm representing homeowners or subs or general contractors, and as you know, there's a million different things that can go wrong
there
on
really
a construction job.
There's a ton.
There's miscommunication, misunderstandings. There's just so much room for those disputes to arise. And then for my business clients, that's just sort of the nature of doing business, right? Once you put yourself out there and are doing business with the public, there's going to be disputes, disagreements. It could be, vendors. I have, represent Anchor Bar in Frederick, which originally started up, I think, in Buffalo. The first one was in Buffalo. Just disputes with vendors, just contract disputes. So are you providing the services we paid for? So it's a whole spectrum.
Yeah, I think it's important. I've learned over the past years of being in business now that I need a good attorney that can represent me well when I need them, and being able to just call on them and say, hey, and even taking $1,000 and giving an attorney, putting them on retainer for you, so that's probably a good investment. Hey, yep. What's your retainer fee? Here's $1,500. I'm putting you on retainer for when I need you. What do you need? Nothing yet, but I might.
Yep.
Have you ever had anybody do that with you?
I do. A lot of my business clients, that's how it operates. And usually just the first time clients, I require a retainer. But once we've established that relationship, then I just sort of, invoice them whenever I do work for them. But yeah, I absolutely.
Oh, you mean like that the established relationship means once he knows you'll pay on a regular basis, like you'll pay the fee, then that's called an established relationship.
That is an established relationship. You're building the trust.
Come on. Yeah, I get it. It's a two-way street. Yeah.
Yep. Well, that was the agreement, right? I would give you.
You don't want me to sue you, do you?
Yes.
Don't breach the contract.
Yeah. That was the agreement.
That's a stupid idea to breach the contract with the attorney that you hired to represent you.
Yep. And unfortunately, I've been fortunate that I haven't had many of those situations. I've really only had a few over the past 10 plus years where I've had to sue a client for fees. So I've been fortunate in that respect. But even,
I can tell you one of my experiences. I don't know if it's always like this or we had to hire someone and he was billing me by the click of if he picked up the phone to call me and he didn't reach me and he left a voicemail, $50. If he had to send me a text, $10. If he had to send an email and then read the email, process the email, hand it to his assistant to touch the email, $150. I'm like, so guess what I stopped doing? I stopped taking his calls. I was like, dude, you're just calling me to give me updates so you can charge me. There's nothing that's taken place yet. Like, this thing is so down that it's like the goalpost way over there. You don't have to call me every other day, give me updates.
Yep.
You're billing me crazy amount because I'm a fee for service guy. Like, hey, Brian, what do you need? Okay, it's going to be $10,000. Okay, I'm not going to charge you more than that unless you decide to come in and say you want to change the color or something, right?
Yep.
So I had a hard time with that. I said, I just need a guy that says, I'm going to charge you $5,000 or $2,000, whatever the dollar amount was to go accomplish X. And it was really hard for me to pay that guy's bill, but I paid it. But I said, I will never talk to you again because you're going to charge me for when I break up with you.
Yeah. and it is tough because...
Anyway, so does everyone build that way?
Yes and no, I will say.
Okay, good. Depends on what it is,
You're right. It is a different industry, and people aren't used to pay. It's a combination of things. Like you said, it's the rate per hour. So obviously, it's like doctors.
I just wanted to talk to the assistant the whole time.
Yes.
I'm like, dude, I don't need to talk to your assistant almost more than you. You're paralegal. Let me just talk to her because her rate's $75 an hour. Yours is $500.
Yeah.
Can I just talk to her?
Yep. So
this was like my practical side of how I'm going to spend all this money.
Yep.
Anyway, I know a lot of people think this way.
No, absolutely.
I know they do.
Absolutely, they do.
But is there any way around that? I don't know. I'm just asking.
Some, I think, lawyers, bill differently than others. So, first of all, I bill to the 10th of an hour. So that's pretty much as narrow as you can get. There's lawyers. This has probably been put out of practice a little bit. It used to be like you'd have lawyers that would bill to like a half hour, or even sometimes I've seen a full hour. I think those practices are gone.
Oh, like if you took the
if
call?
they spent 10 minutes,
we round up to the nearest hour.
Or at least a half hour. And so you could work 40 hours, 48 hours a day, with single
yes,
day.
You could, baby.
48 billable hours. Those days I think are gone. But still, the notion of the average person that like a 10-minute phone call could cost $50 or $75 is outrageous, and I get that. But and again, there are lawyers. Like I often will give clients, discounts if particularly if it's been a really busy month, like a lot of work going on, to try to ease.
It's called a volume discount, everybody.
Yep. Try to ease that burden, but like you said, it's a matter of supply and demand, and
true.
And there are guidelines that the court actually puts out in terms of what lawyers should be billing.
I did not know that.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
And obviously it increases as your years of experience go up. And then of course in certain areas like cities, it's higher than in more rural areas. But yeah, a lot of times these guidelines, if you've been practicing for 15 to 20 years, the court guidelines say you should be billing, at least $300, $350 an hour, and then obviously it just goes up from there. So if you're like obviously in New York City working at a big firm and you're been practicing for 20 years, then they bill $700-$800, even $1,000 an hour. But it is a sort of
I think also it represents the size of the deal though too. Like think about it. What are you really needing them for? Is it $1 million deal, $10 million, $20 million deal? Is it a $5,000 issue?
Yeah.
I mean, so I think it becomes perspective.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's what you have to find someone that sort of matches your needs. And obviously, those lawyers in New York City charging $1,000 an hour or more, typically they're working for large corporations,
Correct.
Fortune 500. That can spend a few $1 million or $10 million a year on legal fees
as a write-off
or more.
As a write-off of their legal fees. Yeah. Which, technically speaking, all legal fees are write-offs, aren't they, for business expense? Almost all.
I think so. I don't do tax law.
Okay, that's a good question
so
for the CPA.
I probably shouldn't even answer that.
I'm pretty sure I've been able to write off all my legal fees. So I think you should too. In that tax book, it is so thick. I am certain it's in there somewhere. What's the biggest case you've ever won?
I would almost say there's two, and one of them is on plaintiff's side, one is on the defendant's side. So on the plaintiff's side, this was in around 2008 during the whole financial crisis, mortgage crisis. So we actually obtained a $1.25 million jury verdict against Wells Fargo for mortgage fraud. So that was in that prime.
You guys sued the bank and won?
Yep.
Wow.
Now
I thought banks always win.
They usually do, and it was just
well done, Brian.
Yeah,
good job. That's right up there suing the insurance company.
Yeah,
that's pretty good.
It was right at that time where that fallout had taken place. I think it was late 2008. So
yeah,
the meltdown.
The Fannie Mae Freddie Mac deal.
Yep, just the whole mortgage market had just sort of the meltdown had happened.
Stated income went away. There was no more stated income.
Yep. And in this case, what was different about it was in those stated income cases, they were giving mortgages to people that had no income or assets to justify it.
I was a product of that, by the way. We did really, really well. We bought a lot of houses, flipped a lot of houses during that time. And I was shocked that really ever existed.
Yeah.
I could go stated income.
Yeah.
I make X amount of dollars. And they didn't want any documentation to prove it. Now, I was as ethical as I could have been during those times. But my point is, that was wild.
It was wild, and that's...
You paid a higher interest rate.
Yeah.
That's how we did it. We just paid higher interest rates because you went state. It was like a point higher. 1 point is nothing.
Yeah. And that's why the meltdown happened.
I'm sorry. So was I part of that process? I wasn't part of that. It's not because of what I was doing.
No.
The system was in place.
Well, yeah. It was primarily, I would say,
the banks were hedging on the government backing the loans.
There was that, and the other part is they were packaging the loans as securities and selling them as a security in the open market, like the stock market.
Wow.
So the banks originally, they would want to make sure that whoever they were loaning money to could pay it back, because if they didn't, the bank was left holding the bag, right? So you want to make sure that the person you're loaning money to can pay you back. So what made it financially, profitable for them to not care who they were lending to and whether or not they could pay it back was, as soon as they, right after they would give that mortgage, they would package all these mortgages into a security, just like a stock, and then sell it on the stock market to other investors. And so in those other investors, they also lost a whole lot of money when those mortgages lost all their value. Those investors that bought that mortgage as a security, like a stock, lost all their money.
Dropped like a rock. Yeah.
Yep. And then obviously the government came in and saved all the banks. And it was that time, and the meltdown had just started. And so I think people were realizing, or people had realized at that time, by the time the case went to trial, people realized what the banks were doing.
It was a jury trial.
It was a jury trial.
Oh, yeah, they were mad at banks.
Yeah.
Yeah, very mad at banks.
Yeah. And I am not aware of a case like that before or since. That was a big one. It sort of came out of nowhere, too.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
And your other one?
The other one was one of the defense partnership cases I was mentioning earlier, how a dispute between two partners that are running these nursing home facilities, and they had been doing it for 20 years, and they had a falling out, and the other
Were they 50-50? Must have,
They were not. My client had a higher percentage interest in the company, but the other partner really ran the day-to-day operations.
Got it. So managing member and member.
Yeah. So they had a falling out, and like I said, there was these haphazard documents that they had drafted themselves, and he ended up suing him for $3 million and seeking lifetime compensation. I mean, fortunately, at the end of the day, that was a judge trial, and the judge ruled in favor of my client and gave him nothing. But that was a risky, roll of the dice.
Wow.
Anything could have happened.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this is, in your experience, nearly 25 years now in practice, what are some tips that you would give someone who's starting out in business? It could be a field that you're used to. Like, what do you advise someone to do who's starting up? They're putting their shingle up. Hey, I'm going to business for myself. What do you advise?
At this point, I would probably advise getting a SEO expert. So much. Basically, there's two ways to build up a client base on your own. Is one is word of mouth. Once you do good for a client and they come back or they tell other people, like that's sort of the word of mouth way, and that is absolutely great. And anybody can take time to develop organically. And the other way is, a lot through marketing and search engine optimization and all of that. And, even putting in like a few $100s a month into advertising can help you sort of get that boost off the ground. And it can, often pay off in the long run, and I would say for me, it was both of those angles sort of helped. It was, building that client base by providing good services.
Yep.
As you mentioned, at a relatively good value compared to others.
Come on, yeah.
And that makes a difference.
It does make a difference, especially when you're starting out the gate.
Yep.
You're hungry, and you've got to serve whoever gets in front of you and show them the value. And if you give them, hey, I'm giving away I'm not getting my top dollar, but you're earning clients for life.
Yep.
And sometimes that's really what it's about, is that loyalty. Because once you've got loyalty, they'll refer you to everybody.
Absolutely.
If they feel like they got hit over the head with fees out the gate, it's
it.
like, especially when you're young and you need a client base.
Yep.
And
I'd say that's played a large part in mine. Like I said, I wouldn't nickel and dime clients, and I'd often give them discounts if it was a busy month, and building that relationship, that trust, and they come back. Especially a lot of these business clients and landlords. It's like there are people that have legal needs every month or every year.
Yeah, it happens on a regular basis. Yeah.
I have various businesses that have those kind of needs month to month, and if you provide that good service and don't try to nickel and dime them, and you could definitely build up a business.
If you're thinking there's a lot of people out there that they love the idea of being a lawyer, they love the idea of practicing law. Maybe they're on the mock trial team, or they're introduced to it young in life. You have any advice for them as to should they pursue law school? Should they, people that want to be in the industry? I mean, do you recommend getting into the industry?
Yeah, I mean, anyone who has a passion for law, legal practice, I would say they should. I mean, obviously, should be careful about how much you spend. Like you have to make sure whatever debts you take on for law school are worth it.
Are all law schools the same amount of money?
No, it varies. Sort of similar to colleges. There's all different types of price ranges.
And it doesn't matter where you went to law school. I mean, as long as you did well, does it matter? To get the first job, do you think it matters? Or is it perspective?
It does in some respects. I mean, if you have a degree from Harvard or Yale or any of the Ivy League law schools, just like regular college, that will definitely help you get you a job at a firm, especially a larger firm. But even if you wanted to work in a medium-sized firm, if they see you have a degree from an Ivy League law school, they're gonna
favor you. They'll favor you.
Yeah. And actually, it'll probably make it easier. Like the large law firms, everyone is sort of
coming from that area
there.
already.
So if you wanted to go to a smaller or medium-sized firm, you'd probably be a shoo-in. And so there's all different levels of sort of law school, and they all have different reputations, and but I mean, if you find something that's right, budget-wise, and and anyone has a passion for the law. Absolutely. It's definitely worth pursuing.
So there's, but what do you think the hurdle is or the hump is before they finally start, not every law student comes out making six figures, right?
Yep.
I mean, they don't. Is that true? They're somewhere in that 50 to 80,000 range. I don't know, but I think people have like 7 figures in their mind. I'm going to be making $1 million a year.
Yeah.
I think that's expectations, right?
Yeah, and that's at the large firms. At the large firms, you can make that as a first-year associate. You can make some. I mean, maybe not 7 figures, but low, mid, 6s, or So yeah, you can. But that's. Large firms are working 80, 90 hours a week.
They own you.
Yeah, yeah. So
you're there. You are theirs.
Yeah, and it's brutal. And that's I did that for a couple of years, and it's brutal. And I knew I didn't want to be there forever. I wanted to work, move to a smaller firm, and then eventually on my own.
But so you recommend it, and get into a good law school that has notability, because it'll help you get into a mid to large. It's likely that it'll help you get into a mid to a large size firm.
Yeah. I mean, it also depends on what type of career you want. Like, so if you're looking to serve in the public sector, or do more public sector service work, then you don't need to have like a degree from Harvard. You can go to a 2nd or 3rd tier school and be fine. So everyone has sort of different needs. But if you're interested in the law, I guess the positive is the number of schools has proliferated, so there's more options. So you don't have to go to a higher tier school to get a law degree and practice law. Which
how hard was the test to pass?
It's pretty hard, and it's interesting is a lot of people.
Frank Abagnale passed the law test. Catch me if you can. Frank Abagnale, he passed the law test. I think he just studied, he crammed a weekend and he passed it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, that's the guy from the movie that Leonardo DiCaprio played, right?
Catch Me If You Can.
Yeah.
I mean, he studied, he crammed, he did it.
Yeah.
But it's really not that easy.
No, it's not. And he probably, my guess is he was probably higher up on the IQ charts.
Yeah. I think he was.
I think he also pretended to be a pilot and actually piloted planes.
So
he probably taught himself how to do that,
Yeah,
too.
I think so. He probably was co-pilot for quite a while.
Yeah.
This is before YouTube.
Yeah.
He probably had some 1, 2, 3 books.
Yeah.
He's like, all right, this is how you do it.
Yeah.
So it is tricky, right?
It is, and the interesting about it is there's
how many times did you take the test before you passed?
Once, sir.
Well done. Wow, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Right? Do you have to wait if you fail it? Do you have to wait? Is there a timeline you have to wait?
I think there is. I don't remember. It's been so long ago. I mean, you're talking now. This is 1997.
You're long in the tooth.
Yes. Yes. So you're really challenging my memory. I think there is. I think I think the test is only offered, or maybe even once or twice a year. So I think if you failed, you would have to wait at least maybe a few months.
Do you remember when prepaid legal was a thing?
I do. I think
Early
it's
2000s?
still around, and I think I even get some calls sometimes from them. They're always looking to sign you up.
Sign you up. Prepaid legal. That was early 2000s. Was it was like a 3-tier marketing system, like pyramid scheme.
Yeah.
Yeah. Get everybody sign up. Everybody get a lawyer in your pocket. You got trouble? Call this number.
Yep.
Get you out of speeding tickets.
Yep. And for something simple like that, it could work. Because speeding tickets are, it's the same thing over and over again. But anything more complicated than that, then it's probably not going to serve you well.
Probably not. But, probably not.
The interesting thing about the LSAT, there's actually no legal questions on the LSAT. It has nothing to do with the law. It's all logic questions.
Really?
Yeah, which I think a lot of people don't realize that.
I would never have guessed that.
Yep. So it's all logic questions because they just want to see your analytical thinking. There's not a single question about the law on it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So parents listening, if you want little Johnny to grow up to be a lawyer, teach him logic.
Yep. And just like there's SAT study prep courses, there's LSAT study prep courses. And I would highly recommend doing that if you're going to prep for the LSAT, because they teach you the type of questions that are on the test, and so you can sort of prepare and see the patterns and types of questions that you're going to be likely confronted with. And that definitely is helpful going into it, knowing the type of questions you're going to be facing.
Brian, how do you you and I were talking about this before. You at times walk into people's most stressful situations. It's kind of like a doctor walks into like an emergency room. People's stress levels are through the roof. people come to you typically when not planning. They usually come to you when there's a problem, right? And they need you to fix it fast, somehow make this better.
Yeah.
And people's stress levels are at a 10. So how do you manage that stress, right? Because they're almost like dumping their stress on you. They want you to download all of their problems.
Yep.
How do you process that stress level? How do you manage that? Because I could see that being very like, it's always drama. It's like living in a drama, like a novella, a soap opera.
Yep, that is absolutely true. I would say lots of red wine.
That just lowers you right down.
No.
That just puts you to sleep.
I say that jokingly. I will have like a couple of glasses, here or there at night, and but obviously that is a problem with the legal profession, as has one of the highest rates of alcoholism of any profession, because people don't find healthy ways to deal with that stress, because it is very stressful. So I say it's a combination of things. I mean, one is I'm a little bit more stoic by nature. Like, I don't run highly emotional myself. Like, that's just more my disposition.
Mm-hmm.
So that helps. I'm not like really amped up, that way. But I still am like performance driven. So I'm always trying to do my best. So I'm going to make sure I've done everything I can to win a case, do the best I can for the client. And then the third part of that is then letting go. So I find like the best part, because stress is essentially like, it's really it's a triggering a fear mechanism in you, right?
Yes.
Fear of failure, fear of not doing something properly, fear of messing something up and then being judged for it. So a lot of it's fear based. So I just do the best I can, and I know I've done the best I can and everything I can for client. And then at that point, it's sort of out of my hands and in God's hands.
It's true. Yeah.
And that is sort of just the perspective that I try to take. Now, of course, like, I'm not immune to it. Like on a day of trial, morning of trial, I'm thinking about it.
It's like before the big game.
Yep.
Before the big fight. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, your mind is sort of going a mile a minute. So you're not immune to it, but there's definitely a lot of things you can sort of do to help mitigate it. And I find a lot of that sort of just positive self-talk, like things I just sort of mentioned, like, okay, I've done the best I can, and the outcome is out of my hands at this point.
It's in God's hands at that point.
It's in God's hands. And, actually I say one of the books that I've, gone back to often is an oldie, but a goodie. It's called The Power of Positive Thinking. And I believe the author is a Christian. I checked his name because I didn't want to come on here and have the name of the book but not have the name of the author.
That's all right.
So I did check his name. The name of the author is Dr. Norman Vincent. And I'm not sure about this, but I think the book might have been published like in the 1970s. Like, it's pretty old. And there's just a lot of good tidbits, and of course a lot of them are sort of Bible-based, because I'm pretty sure he was a Christian.
I love it.
And it's just a lot of positive thinking to help you in those difficult times.
Well, you have to remain positive.
Yep.
You have to. I mean, like, that's like even for your own disposition. What is the word?
Disposition.
Disposition. Sorry.
Not to be confused with deposition.
That's what I was about to say. Disposition is keeping our mind focused on positive outcomes. Obviously, if our mind's constantly thinking about negative and going negative, it's hard to overcome that in ourselves. Like, we wind up defeating ourselves in many respects, right?
Yep.
Be a realist, but not a negative, right? Don't take ourselves down a negative course of it's all just going downhill from here now. So a level of optimism has got to be very heavy, I think, when you're doing your role.
Yep, and that's definitely one of the focuses of his book. And a lot of times that mindset can be self-fulfilling. Like if you have that negative mindset, it often can
everything
bring
else
about
follows.
Negative results.
That's it.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good. Well, Brian, I appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you for having me again.
This was I had to get you all the way down from Maryland. If people want to connect with you, obviously you're an attorney in the state of Maryland.
Yep.
And so if people want to connect with you, we're going to put your website up so people can connect with you that way.
Sure.
If you're looking for new clients, are you always looking for clients?
Always. I mean, I'm doing okay. I'm not in
Brian's always looking for new customers. If you got a really good case, I'm sure he would entertain.
I won't say no.
All right, you're a
nice, good client.
You're a nice guy. I love it. But yeah, so Brian, thank you for sharing your story with us, your perspective, and your experience with us. I know I continue, and I will continue to call you when I have something big going on, just to fact check these other lawyers who are billing me crazy hours.
You're always welcome to, James, your family.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And he always says, well, James, I don't practice law in Texas. But here's what I would say if it was in Maryland. This is what it is. So, hey, guys, if you liked what you heard, go ahead and like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Comment down below. Let us know what you're going through, what you're experiencing. If there's something there that we can respond to you in the comments, Brian will follow along. He can tag back and shoot back a response. Or there's a lot of good lawyers out there. We do really highly recommend having good counsel in your corner. The Bible talks a lot about having their safety and numbers, or safety and good counsel. So we really need to surround ourselves with people who are smarter than us. That's really the goal. Never be the smartest man, smartest woman in the room. That's actually pretty, it's problematic. So it's great to have wise people around you, like Brian, just sharing with us the right tips on having good contracts. And that's the key thing for businesses. Having a good contract, things are well laid out, and then honor it. Honor your word, honor your handshake, and honor what you said you would do for the client. Thanks, guys. God bless you, and we'll see you next time.